Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Jens Heitland Show, where I interview experts from different fields to connect the dots of innovation and entrepreneurship. My name is Jens Heitland, and I am your host. Today's guest is an international thought leader and pioneer of the UX industry. Please welcome to the show, Jeff Parks. Jeff, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm great, Jens. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. It's awesome. So before we go into all the fun topics of podcasting, of course, UX design and transformations and so on, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What is your story?
Well, actually, before I got into tech, I actually went to school to get into behavioral and cognitive psychology. So I actually started my career long time ago, 25 years ago or so, working with clients with traumatic brain injuries, helping them learn to walk and speak again, working with neurologists, speech language pathologists, physiotherapists, counseling families. I also worked with kids in group homes and gangs in Toronto, and pre-kindergarten kids with learning disabilities. They all had their own rewards, learned so much about how the brain works, how people think, how they react, getting people to stay calm, how to model behavior in different ways that would help to influence others in a positive way. And also by extension, I mean, after doing a postgrad degree in IT, I thought from those experiences, which were very intense, emotionally and physically and whatnot, I thought, well, a career in tech's going to be a walk in the park by comparison. Now, of course, being an entrepreneur was not a walk in the park. But after that, I joined a startup company that built Corel's first e-learning program for WordPerfect. For those of you old enough to remember WordPerfect and Corel. I also run a Microsoft certified training program teaching things like planning, training, and motivation delivery for engineers. That's the specific intent of the program back then. And that was actually used as a benchmark to measure against other training programs because it actually took on experiential learning, taking on different creative solutions for how they would problem solve, and got them out of sort of again, traditionally, this is engineering and the constructs and the things engineers are learning today are very different than they were 15 years ago in terms of their capacity, but getting it into a more creative mindset and to consider how designers would think about things and executives might think about things. And then I bounced around a little bit because of recessions. I went back to manage a nonprofit organization, which sort of harkened back to the healthcare days that I worked in, helping people that were either homeless or had a hard time finding jobs to maintain employment. And then I worked as the web architect at a Crown corporation. And then I decided to get into information architecture after that contract ran out because Google was coming on board. Search was a huge thing. I'm sure, Jens, you remember back in the day when the web started, everyone put everything in their company onto the website. Before mobile came on, right? So you'd have like 4 drop-down menus of information and search. In my mind, I thought, well, the biggest problem people are going to have to tackle is how do I find everything I need whenever I need it? And so that was a discipline that got me involved in that. And then I came across this guy named Adam Curry, who created a podcast that I listened to every day. There was something about him. He had this great voice for radio. He was a wonderful storyteller, but he was also a former video jockey on music television in the United States, or MTV. And I started to read blog posts in the design industry and from certain thought leaders in the industry. And they were interesting, but what concerned me was the comments that would appear on the blog posts afterwards. If they agreed with the thought leader, if the thought leader agreed with the original article, then everyone else would agree with the thought leader and the article. And then that article created the next thought leader in that idea, because this is how young the industry was, right? But what was more concerning to me is if the thought leader didn't agree with the idea, and 99 times out of 100, they were being respectful, they were just sharing a different opinion or point of view, then everyone would start disagreeing with the idea without putting any thought into it. And, so I thought, what if I learned how to podcast? I had no idea how to do any of this. There were no apps, nothing. And to me, it was a passion. It was a desire, but it wasn't a desire to market myself. It was a desire to get more ideas out into the world and to provide greater context and understanding. So I had to learn how to write XML, because you had to write XML code to get things into the iTunes store for Apple. for podcasting. I had to learn hardware. I had no idea how. I wasn't an audiophile. I have no idea. Your colleague Vern and my friend Werner Pukert introduced me to this microphone and this headset. I have no idea what I was doing, but I loved it. And I love the idea of being able to get ideas out there. And at boxesnarrows.com, the first peer-written journal on information architecture, said, would you like to do podcasts for us? And I'm like, sure. No one's paying me to do this. They flew me to Miami for the IA Summit. We recorded all the shows. And I think the thing that really struck home with me, Jens, and sort of the thing that really made me feel great about what I was doing was I launched a couple of shows from Miami, and within 24 hours, 80,000 people around the world heard the presentations that maybe only a couple hundred people heard because they broke the room out, the main room out into 3 rooms. So 200 people were inspired by someone and their ideas to 80,000 worldwide. Now, I'm not harping on the number, but if you look at that from a percentage perspective, that's just huge, that's incredible.
Can you give us a timestamp to that? When was that?
That was 2006.
Yeah, so it was pre-normal podcasting, normal in a way of how it works right now. And everyone is doing it.
Yes. So to give you an example, put that in context, at the last Apple event, if you saw Tim Cook talking about the changes to the iTunes store, he put up a screenshot of the first iTunes podcast, and in the middle is actually Adam Curry. That was the gentleman I talked about. So I had no idea what I was doing. There were a lot of people that would come back to me and complain about, well, the sound quality is horrible. And they'd talk to me. I'd be like, well, of course it's horrible. I have no idea what I'm doing. And we're taking a shot in the dark and hoping for the best with these things. And then Johnny Holland, another interaction design magazine based out of Amsterdam, run by Jeroen van Gil, Boxes and Arrows by Christina Woodkey and Chris Baum back in the day, asked me to do one-on-one interviews with people. So it was a truly incredible experience, and the intent and the thing that really drove me and made me happy and brought me joy, right? There's a difference between happiness and joy as an entrepreneur. If you want to be happy, that's going to be a long road because you're going to wait for little things to check boxes. But the thing that brought me joy was, I would get handwritten letters, and I still have them. That's my trophy case. They're handwritten letters from people that have thanked me for my time in mentoring and helping them through workshops and the podcasts that I did. It wasn't the money that I made because I've spent it now. And it wasn't about any of those other things. It was about, how do I help other people? How do I inspire the next generation and the current one do better than we're doing now? And it was incredible. And my wife was also my business partner. We led workshops, 5 years, probably 5 years ahead of our time from a business perspective, teaching user experience, IA, what is now UX writing, content strategy. We got to travel to the Caribbean, all over Canada, the US, Mexico, and Europe to lead workshops, to open and close conferences and things we've learned. So I'm very, very lucky, being in the right time at the right place and having so many people give me that opportunity was just mind blowing. And especially when I look back on it now in terms of what I was able to do. So
yeah, awesome, great story. So if we take now a strange word, which is innovation, into the mix, what is innovation from your perspective? How do you see innovation with your eyes?
I think innovation to me when I was younger. So I'm 48. So when I was 20 years ago, I always looked at innovation as what is the newest thing? What is the trend? That's innovative, right? That's something new. As I get older, I tend to look at it with a much wider lens in terms of how I see innovation. So if you look at the history of innovation, and there's a couple of good books. One is Where Good Ideas Come From by Steve Jonson. I can provide you links to these things afterwards. The other one is How to Fly a Horse by Kevin Ashton. The Secret History of Creation, Invention, and Discovery. And these authors look at, the biggest impact that people have created over the course of time that have had a true meaning to society. Things like the invention of the light bulb, things like, the record player and things like that have truly stuck over the course of time. And so I tend to look at innovation as two things. I think a lot of people look at innovation as adaptation. So they try to get people to adapt to the time they're in. So if we look at things like business transformation and change management, which are buzzword terms, you're trying to get people to adapt to a new way of working, thinking, and working through processes to get to a specific outcome. And typically, when you follow that, when you're trying to innovate, you don't get there. You almost always fail. Whereas if you look at the history of innovation, even over the short term, if you look at it through the concept or the lens of what's called expectation, you actually start to iterate from ideas that have already existed. So if you go back in time to, like, I think the 1700s, there was an inventor by the name of Louis de Martinville, a French inventor. And he created this machine called a phonograph. And his idea at the time, his assumption at the time was, I've got a machine that can actually grab sound waves, pull them out of the air, and write them out on parchment. And his thought was, I am going to assume that people are going to read these sound waves on parchment like people would read words on a page in a book. So the concept of playback for sound never occurred to him. But Alexander Graham Bell thought about that, and he invented the record player. So it's that idea of taking what someone's already done and building on it. So if you take the idea of something like the iPod, right? So back in the day, we had Walkmans, put a cassette player in, created a mixtape. There's a whole process you had to go through. And then the internet came along and Napster came out, and you could download all this music for free, but you record it sort of chained to your desk. But Apple is the master of expectation. They actually took that idea and created the iPod, and it immediately took hold with everybody. I can get everything easily. I can walk around with hundreds of songs in my pocket. I can make my own mixtape by moving things around. So that they didn't try to innovate in terms of getting people to adapt to something entirely different. They simply took the expectation idea and moved it to there. Another more recent one actually was, I remember growing up, my father was the director of engineering for DuPont, and he would write out a to-do list and put it on his briefcase where he was leaving out the door the next day. And it would remind him of all the things he had to do that day so that he could focus. So, over time, there's a popular concept that's come out called bullet journaling. I don't know if you've heard of bullet journaling, right? Where you take a notepad and you've got some icons, and it's the idea of helping you to focus, right? And it's basically a to-do list. And then there was another company that came along that Jeff Sheldon created called UG Monk or UG Monk. I'm not sure how you pronounce his company, but essentially he's a minimalist mindset around products that he offers. And he created a concept called analog. In analog, he has this beautiful wood box with index cards that he borrowed from bullet journaling. And he has 3 cards with categories that say today, another one that says next, and another one that says someday. And you put up the today card with things you've written out on pen and paper in front of you, and then you can sort of use the bullet journaling concept. There's nothing new about it. And when it first came out, Jens, to be honest with you, I thought, this is a joke, right? Somebody's spoofing me. You're not seriously asking for money for this. But it was true. He created a Kickstarter project. I think he got nearly $500,000 in funding for cards in a box. And it's this idea that, the ideas themselves, is he really being innovative? No, he's not in the creative sense. He's simply extrapolating on something and then pulling a shared experience and problem. And what a lot of people would talk about today around product, market, and fit. He's taken a product, he's found a market for it, and it fits perfectly with what people want. And he's made tons of sales on this idea. So for me, innovation is getting people to stop trying to think that they're going to create a new idea that changes the world. Because even hearing a talk at UX Week, part of my podcasting experience, an author, Ashton, who wrote a book called Steal Like an Artist. And he shared this great story. It's online, so I'll share a link with your listeners if you'd like to later on your video, on your YouTube channel. But he was talking about his experience meeting the rock band Green Day for the first time. And there was a bigger story around it, but it led towards the end about him meeting Green Day. But he started off his presentation with, there are no original ideas, right? 95% of what's out there has already been thought of. You just haven't heard of it yet, or you don't know the original source. And so when I heard that, after 3 or 4 years of podcasting and interviewing all the thought leaders around the world that I could possibly get my hands on and publishing all these shows, I immediately sat up in my chair and I went, yes, Ashton, preach, talk to me. Because quite frankly, I'm not hearing anything that these people are talking about that are on stage that's really remarkable anymore. It's not leading me to new thoughts and ideas. It's the same idea over and over again. And then when I came across expaction and I thought about innovation, I realized, right, there aren't necessarily any new ideas. It's how we communicate them, how we package them, and how we motivate people to not try to adapt, but try to move them into a new space that allows them to get excited about the ideas that are in front of them.
Great one. Was just muting because the hell is breaking loose here. So for those who are listening, and there's a little bit of raindrops in the background, it's definitely from my side.
Well, if it's on my side, it's because I live on a farm and there are tractors rolling hay bales and cows in and out of around our property. So I apologize.
No, I haven't heard anything of that yet.
Okay, good.
Now, what I was interesting, love your perspective on innovation. How much of that do you think is culture, and how much of that is just, hey, I want to be showing up?
Yeah, I think it depends if you're talking about it from a company point of view or an entrepreneurial point of view.
Let's take the company point of view. That would be an interesting one for a lot of listeners.
Yeah, I think you have to understand. Well, you don't have to do anything. My perspective, excuse me, is having run my own company for so long and then going back to work for an organization. I think I felt like it's in no disrespect to the last company I worked for, or the people that work there, or the leaders in the company, not at all. My interpretation was I felt like I stepped into a time machine and went back 15 years because I had the ability to be so creative, because people are looking for solutions to complex problems, and because I was now leading a design team that had a specific focus on a specific product and they were working on changing features. The focus became very narrow in comparison to that other experience. So I think when you're in a company, I think you have to understand the business model, right? What is the company trying to step towards? In product companies, which a lot of companies are today in terms of tech and following an agile construct, you have to get your hands on the roadmap. You have to understand, where do you want to be from this point going forward, right? And understand that if you want to be innovative, and if you define innovative as being creative and developing something brand new that you can put your name on, that will blow the minds of people out there, understand the company you're in. Are they going to do that? It's not your company, right? As I told designers, they in the UX industry, it's over the years anyway, it's very much about, I'm not getting buy-in for my ideas. Well, they're not your ideas. They're not even your designs. They're owned by the company. And that may sound cold and harsh to people in terms of, well, I'm a creative. I'm like, I'm not taking that away from you. But if you get caught up in the idea that I need buy-in for my ideas without understanding the goals of the company, you can get buy-in for your ideas outside of your job and be as creative and innovative as you want. But if you're in the company, you need to understand what innovation means to the company. And a lot of the times, what innovation is to an organization, and we talked about this before the show, and you mentioned this, Jens, and you're absolutely right. The bigger a company gets, the harder it is to innovate, right? From a creative point of view. So I think if you're in a company, you really need to understand, and it's a legitimate business question, right? If you're struggling and wondering, why aren't we doing mobile first? It's 2021. Why aren't we focusing on IA? Why is content something that flies to the background and we just need to ship? Like Amazon is shipping code and product every second of every day now. It used to be 11.5 seconds. Every second of every day, Amazon shipping new code. Shipped code. Like in the time we've been on this call, they've probably shipped code 57 times, 157 times, whatever the math is. So, you also have to get your head around innovation in terms of, yes, we're moving faster, but what are we actually producing that people see, that they can tangibly put their hands on and experience, right? How are we getting there, right? I want to do something. Well, have you talked to the engineering team? Yes, on the front end, it might be easy to do visually, but it might take them 5 months to uncouple the code stack and the tightly coupled complex platform they've built over 15 years to make that small change, right? So it goes back to what I was saying before about adaptation, and people are complicated, right? For a myriad of reasons. culture, corporate culture, ego. Don't get me started on ego because, oh my God, right? Ignorance, even in the information age. It's amazing to me. How are you not more curious than you are ignorant? Is there an excuse for ignorance anymore? I don't think there is. Ask questions. You know, you can't possibly know everything, even if you're the owner of the thing. So it's difficult and it gets convoluted, and I understand people's frustration, especially if they're working in a company. But I think if you understand the purpose of the company and the direction they're going, it's easier for you to produce outcomes that they want and they can measure and they can test against. But it's also an opportunity for you to go, okay, that's not what I see as innovative. So nothing personal against the company. I need to go find something else to do because I'm not finding my joy here, right? I'm not even finding happiness here with every output. I'm not finding the joy. I don't wake up every day excited about what I'm doing. I'm just banging my head against the wall, cranking on another box or checking a box, regardless of your role.
Yeah. I can fully relate to that because for me, that's one of the reasons I jumped out of the large corporate world as well, because just over the last 2 years, how much I accelerated my learning curve while building businesses and changing my businesses, adapting like basically on a daily basis, if not to say on an hourly basis. I love what Gary Vaynerchuk is saying. You need to love the process and being in it, not the outcome. And of course, you need to have a vision to strive towards something, but it shouldn't be the money. That's number one thing. And is you need to love the process. Like you need to love what you do every day, because then you will be successful long term.
Yes, 100%. In fact, I don't know why I came across this the other day, but I was tired and I was looking for some inspiration, and I came across a video by my fellow Canadian comic Jim Carrey, and he was giving a graduation speech that went viral a few years ago. But speaking to that exact point, he was talking to the graduating class, and he said, "You can fail at what you don't want, so you might as well take a chance at doing what you love." And I thought that was brilliant, right? Like why would you not pursue that? And I think a lot of that speaks to people's desire for how they define success, right? Success is how much money you make. Sure, that's one factor, right? But I know a lot of wealthy people who are the most miserable SOBs you'd ever meet in your life. Like they're miserable.
Yeah.
And I have friends and I have colleagues around the world that, have no potential to retire, don't have a ton of money, but they are the happiest, most joyful people you'd ever meet. So what matters to you? And I think the problem is, especially as an entrepreneur or working in a company, no one's going to define that for you. You have to figure that out, right? What brings me joy and what gets me my adrenaline pumping isn't having the stage like now. As we talked about before, I'm a horrible marketing person. Nobody may know who I am. But to me, that's success, because it wasn't about promoting me. It was promoting ideas when I started podcasting. And my joy and the adrenaline rush I get is from helping other people. It's not about, look at Jeff. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. If you need that in your life, wonderful. Maybe that's success for somebody. And if that's success for you, outstanding. Great. I'm happy for you. But there's so much more that you need to consider, I think, in terms of innovation, right? Why are you getting into the space? What are you doing? And how are you defining that? And you can't get upset with the company you're working for because they're not doing what you think they should do. Then stop complaining. Go start your own company. Try some different ideas. Or better yet, if you can't leave for whatever reason, then at least make the effort to understand why they're doing what they're doing. Yeah. Then at least you can pull yourself back and understand the value you're adding. Because otherwise you just, and I've done it. I've had to report to leads where I'm like, okay, why would you, that doesn't make, I've given you what? Research shows that you're doing you're going to keep, okay. And I let them stress me out. And then I realize, why am I letting them do that to me? That's ridiculous. They're not thinking about me on their weekend. Why am I? What am I doing? So, it's finding that balance, and there's no easy answer, but doing the work will eventually get you to where you want to be. And what you define as innovation and creativity Again, to me, it's whatever brings you joy.
Yeah. Speaking about failing, we touched on that before the recording as well. Failing is, and specifically coming from the corporate world, failing is seen as something negative.
Yep.
What is your perspective on that?
That's not true. Next question. Just kidding. No, it's ridiculous, right? Like you can't, especially if you want to speak, sticking to the theme of innovation, right? You can't hold in your mind that you shipped something or you've sold something, you've done something that's failed, and then claim to be an organization that is innovative, that is learning, that is customer centric, that cares about the user experience. You can't say that, right? And it's not a problem when you fail, right? It's not. It's a problem if you fail and then you feel like you're in a culture or you're in a position where you have to defend yourself. Because when you're doing that, all you're doing is pointing the finger at other people around you. And that leads nowhere, right? That creates a compromise, a position where you feel like you have to compromise on everything, and everybody's compromising, right? So if you do the work up front to reconcile differences ahead of time and say, okay, let's get on the same page with where we're going and understand that we're not going to succeed on every step. Where do we fail? And, I gave a whole keynote about this at UX Poland in Warsaw, like 5-6 years ago, about the importance of accountability. And I got interviewed afterwards, and they asked me, why did you fly from Canada across the pond, as we like to call it, the Atlantic Ocean, to Warsaw to talk to a group of 700 creatives about accountability? And I said, well, I don't think the creators of Twitter and Facebook would have thought that their tool at some point would have been used to organize a revolution in Egypt, right? Like that probably wasn't the intent, but that is the outcome. And we can't say that we have the solution for everything because we're creating a whole bunch of beautiful designs. Well, how does that solve the problem, right? So it's so important to be able to fail in an organization, and not just fail, but to be able to share what you've learned and express it that way, right? If a company is coming down on you because you didn't succeed or you failed or the product failed, okay, well, let me share what I learned about it. And if their response is, we don't care, you didn't do it good, or you didn't do it well, it's your fault, well, then you might want to consider working for another company, because they're clearly not interested in learning, and they're never going to learn. And if they're not willing to learn and innovate, then there's unlimited choice out there. Competition is everywhere. I remember hearing a story about the CEO of Airbnb putting up a gigantic whiteboard in their head office. And he wanted to know, speaking about learning from failure, he encouraged every member of his team that came to this office to write down the next idea that would kill his company. What's the next idea that's going to take Airbnb off the market? And he used that as a source of inspiration for innovating and evolving the services within the company, right? That's learning from failure. That would be a great corporate culture to work in, because now you don't have to be afraid about failing, because the CEO is going, no, I want to know if I'm going down a path and I start seeing a pattern of ideas that are going, wow, I am heading in the absolutely the wrong direction, and or we can do something different. That would be great. A colleague of mine, Matt Lee, was the lead researcher for Booking.com. And he invited me to Amsterdam to speak to their engineering team, their CEO and CTO in this giant airport hangar that they created for this event. And I talked about how important creativity is and how it could be the missing link between data and common sense to a group of engineers. So you talk about potentially failing. That I could have face planted hard with that audience in that room if you took the stereotype. And Matt was the lead researcher for Booking.com, and the they didn't change their website at all for years, because all of the research he did showed that their website was working. It wasn't beautiful, it wasn't sexy, it wasn't this monumentally awesome thing. But what he did find out was what people really wanted for Booking.com was the ability to book anything within a few taps on their phone. So he led the entire design for their app, which then took off and had remarkable revenues. Right. So he didn't try to change things that weren't broken because we needed to keep up with trends and follow marketing in terms of this is the new thing we have to put on for polish and make it look beautiful. Because again, today people have unlimited choice. So what's the experience you're going to provide them that's going to, help them really go, this makes my life easier, right? This is going to be better. Again, expectation. He didn't take something and fix it and try to push something. He understood the experience through talking to people around the world, a lot of qualitative information, not just data, and pushed something out into the world that people absolutely loved because he knew what was true from their point of view and their experience.
Yeah. Going from failing to transformation, and we touched that as well before the recording. So how important is it for businesses to transform? And as well, if we take transformation from a mindset perspective, how important it is to have transformational mindsets?
Yeah, I think it's really important, especially with the world we're living in now. And I think it's more important now than ever with COVID and the pandemic and how that's really disrupting everybody's thoughts around work and whether they're going back to work and how that's changing the way we think about things. And I think it's also, again, it's a generational construct. Josh Nuttall and you are doing a podcast on reverse mentoring. I think it's Playground XYZ or the XYZ Playground.
Yeah, that's the company, the platform itself. The podcast is called the Reverse Mentor Lab.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah. And I love that idea. It's having the younger. Well, you explain it to me. Sorry, please.
No, it's basically bringing experienced thinkers and young thinkers together, and we call it where leaders of today learn from the leaders of tomorrow. That's basically the theme we use in engagement possibilities.
And to me, that's how I think about transformation. And I think that's how it at best is going to best help. I think the idea of looking to our grandchildren in terms of how we're going to think about designing and innovating for what matters. I mean, we all have access to a lot of the same information now. They're really going back to podcasting. Adam Curry's tagline for his first podcast was, "There are no more secrets, only information we don't yet have." And that was in 2003 or 4 when he started. Look where we are now, right? So if there are no more secrets, isn't it more important to stop worrying about all the things we could do and instead focus on the things we should do? And the should, whether it's the environment, whether it's politics, whether it's culture, whether it's tech, whether it's fintech with respect to Bitcoin and all the other things that are changing the way we're looking at things, I think we need to come to a point where we have to understand what we don't know. There was a great quote by a philosopher who was a reporter actually for a number of years, and his name's Chuck Klosterman, and he wrote a book called "But What If We're Wrong?" And I love the concept because he tries to look at it as if looking at the present as if it were the past. And the quote is that he says it's impossible to understand the world of today until today has become tomorrow. Now, this is no brilliant insight, and only a fool would disagree. Yet it's remarkable how habitually this truth is ignored. We constantly pretend our perception of the present day will not seem ludicrous in retrospect simply because there doesn't appear to be any other option. Yet there is another option, and the option is this. We must start from the premise that, in all likelihood, we're already wrong. And not wrong in the sense that we are examining questions and coming to incorrect conclusions, because most of our conclusions are reasoned and coherent. The problem is with the questions themselves. So if we look at transformation, taking that idea that we're asking the wrong questions, and we can't possibly ask the right questions because we aren't the future generation, and we can't possibly comprehend their perception of the world, and looking at the podcast and the ideas that you're sharing with Joshua around reverse mentorship, then the answers don't lie with us. The answers lie with the generations that are the 17, 18-year-olds and the world as they see it and the world that they would like to move forward or move into. And I think it's our generation, or, I'm 48, so I don't think my job is to tell everyone what to do anymore. I think my job is to share the wisdom that I've garnered over my lifetime, pass that down to the next generation, have them take it or leave it, give them opportunities to fail, learn, and not talk down to them about those failures, but literally offer them the hand up and go, it's all right. Fall down 7 times, get up 8. It's all right. It's fine. If you want to talk about face plants, I shouldn't have a nose anymore being an entrepreneur over the years. I should not be here talking to you today, Jens, but this doesn't kill you. It will make you wiser to make choices. And most importantly, in transformation through experience, you learn what to say no to. And I think that's really important as well, because there's so much coming at us. It's so tempting to say yes to everything, but it's really just as important when you're talking about transformation to understand all the things you're not going to do. And that allows you to focus and learn from those mistakes.
And that's, at least in my experience, that's always the hardest thing, saying no to, because there are so many shiny objects out there.
There is, and it's really hard today, right? Especially if you're lucky enough to get to a point where someone's offering you, a ton of money, right? A whole bunch of money. Even if you need, we all need cash, and there's that shiny object. It's hard. But another thing I learned as an entrepreneur, in retrospect, is it's so important also to have an exit strategy, right? You can get really excited about all your ideas and you can be passionate about it, but if it doesn't take hold, what is it that's going to trip the wire for you to go? And maybe it's money, but maybe it's getting to the point where you're just comfortable and you're not curious about things and you don't wake up every day excited about what you're doing. Those things are just as important as well, to know when to go, yeah, I don't have the passion to be an entrepreneur and innovator in this space. Maybe I need to take a break and try something in another area, or talk to other people.
Yeah. Super important. I did that basically. I don't know if you know Tim Ferriss.
I do. Yep.
He was basically saying that you need to have, he didn't call it exit strategy, but you need to have a plan in case of your failing. So it's like journaling in a way. What's the worst thing that can happen when I'm failing, or when this thing is not happening? What is the worst thing? And I was just writing a plan for me, like structural German style.
Yeah.
And I was just figuring out, hey, the worst thing is that it's not going to work and I will work somewhere else. So how bad is that? Yes, I might have lost a little bit of money, but I'm still alive. I still have my family. So the most important thing is there. Yes. And everything else is just perception from the outside world. Hey, he didn't manage to do it, and that's why he failed. So, but who cares if other people think about that, because they haven't been part of it.
And that's so important from my experience anyway. You have to, especially in this day and age, you have to not care what other people think.
Yeah.
Right. You have to be, I think you have to be respectful. I think you have to know what you don't know to the extent that you can. I know Dunning-Kruger would totally disagree with me on that. You can't know what you don't know, but I think it's important to always be curious and be questioning all the time. Am I right? Right. Especially working on a global scale now, and the idea of thought leadership. That was the thing that sort of discouraged me from the communities of practice and design. Again, wholly grateful for the opportunities people gave me that had no reason to trust me or even give me the opportunity. But the thing that was discouraging to me was that thought leaders got to a point where they got comfortable and they weren't sharing new thoughts and ideas. There was one individual who I greatly respect, came to a conference at Canucks, a big conference, design conference here in Canada in Ottawa. And I was really excited to hear him talk again. And he gave the same talk that was on Vimeo from 6 years ago when I heard him at another conference. Oh. Slight variations, but the same talk. But he wasn't the only one to do this. People do this all the time. And I get it. There's 7 billion people on the planet. Odds are you may not have heard my talk. But I think we're at a point now where, why, if you want to be considered a thought leader, why are you not sharing new thoughts and ideas all the time? But that's my definition of a thought leader. Are you inspiring me to something new? And if you're not, then come back to me when you've got something new to share, a story that might inspire me or help me in terms of thinking about things. But I digress. I mean, at the end of the day, not everyone would agree with me about that, right? Because those people are the ones that have written books and have, done all these different things. So again, to your point around what Tim Ferriss was talking about, when is it time to get out? When is it time to do something different?
Yeah, and that's in the same way from a corporate setting. If you work inside a corporation, what is your exit strategy? And that's, I did my exit after 12 years working in one corporation. And that's not an easy thing to do. It's like splitting up with your wife or husband.
Yeah, sure.
It's similar. And it took me a year and getting into that from a feeling perspective, because you still feel attached to that company, specifically if there's not a hard cut and something like you turned out to be in a bad situation and things are going different parts. If you do this and just decide it for yourself as well as hey, it's not going to work long term, so I will do something else. You still feel attached to that business, and to the people specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, so much of how we identify ourselves is wrapped up in our job. I mean, I remember seeing this pattern early in my career about how I'd go up to someone and I'd be like, "Hi, I'm Jeff," and they'd be like, "Hi, I'm Rob, IBM." I'm like, "Okay, you work for IBM." I mean, no slant against IBM, but or whoever, but everyone would do that. And it's how you start conversations unconsciously when you meet someone for the first time. "Hi, I'm Jeff." "Oh, hi, I'm Tina." "Oh, nice to meet you, Tina. What do you do?" It frames your whole sense of self and how to start a conversation with someone to try to, our job defines us. And it's like, well, it shouldn't, but it does based on relationships and whatnot. And you're right. The longer you stay with a company, I've joined companies that have been bought by other companies, and there's still that feeling there, we were a really tight family and we're not anymore because now we are under this other brand and this other leadership group. Yeah. And there's a lot of resentment that builds around that if there's no sort of onboarding or transformation, as we've talked about. And generally there's no adaptation. There's just, months of wondering whether or not you still have a job. If you do still have a job, trying to build relationships, it's really, really hard. But to your point, yes, you left a company after 12 years. I can't imagine other than, taking a year to figure that out. Yeah, it must have been really hard.
Hard in a way, but it's also it's a blessing, because if you have the possibility to build your own business as a small part, sidetrack of that, it's a blessing. For me, it was a blessing. I've learned so much, and I don't want to miss as well the 12 years, because it is still one of the best companies in the world, as well from how they engage with the leadership and the employees and so on. So I learned so much, and I use all the knowledge I gained and the thoughts I gathered around that as well now for my clients and for the people I work with. So it's only positive for me, at least.
Well, and that's the way you want to take perspective on everything, right? You have again, it's a choice, right? How do you leave things with people? How do you walk away and give yourself the time to cool off? And, if you're emotional about it, either because you're upset or you're burnt out or you don't want to, but it's time and it's hard, it's important to keep those relationships with people and help them understand that it's not about them. It's just time for a change. So
absolutely. So I would like to transition into the last part of the podcast, which is a couple of rapid fire questions.
Okay.
It's very small questions.
Okay.
First question. So if you have the chance or the possibility to work with a project or leading a project that's affecting every human being on Earth, what project would you choose to work with and why?
Project. I would probably choose to work in an industry or project that helped with environmental changes, in terms of things like sustainability for different products globally. And why? Because again, going back to what we talked about, looking at, how do we leave the world a better place for everyone else? And I think the environment is something that is top of everyone's mind, from the food we eat to the health impacts that it has on everyone. And that would, I think, would be fantastic.
Yeah, great one. So next question is, where will you be in a year from now? And you can answer that from a professional perspective and or a personal perspective.
Yeah, I can't say where I'm going to be a year from now professionally, because I'm sort of in that process of trying to figure out what's next for me in terms of what's really going to bring me joy after all the experiences I've had. Personally, my wife and I bought an old stone house on a farm, and I think a year from now we should have new windows, new doors, and we're doing some landscaping. So hopefully we'll be growing a lot of food and looking out on an area that hasn't been ever landscaped since 1830 when the house was built. So that would be nice, along with my St. Bernard, of course, and watching the world go by and just being grateful for all the things that I've been able to do.
That's great. How do you keep yourself informed and up to date these days?
I talk to you.
Every day. No.
Every day. Yes. No, I know. I'm kidding. I apologize. Well, it's kind of like what I said before about saying no to things. when it comes to being informed, I've learned to ignore a lot of things. Yuval Noah Harari wrote a book called Homo Deus, which I a couple of years ago. Great inspiration to me. And he's always noted that power is knowing what to ignore. And so I found great solace in that, in terms of knowing that ultimately, if I can know what to ignore and focus on the people that bring me joy and that are positive, that's what I try to focus on more than anything else. And I stay updated and informed by the people that are doing great work, that are helping other people, and not worrying about trying to keep up with trends and fads and different things with respect to, you know, who's most popular on TikTok and social media.
Love that. This specifically because I get a lot of questions around that topic with social media, because everyone thinks I'm online 24/7, but I'm not at all. It's just perception again.
Well, in this day and age, perception is reality, right?
I know.
How you market yourself, what you do. So, you know, you don't look like you've been up for 24 hours. You look pretty good, and you just did a show before this one, Jen. So I think you're okay. I think you're all right.
It's not too bad, but I will also finish after this one, and then it's taking care of my little daughter.
Well, yeah, that's way more important than talking to me, for sure. Absolutely. Yes.
It's not more important. It's different.
Okay. I would argue it's more important, but okay, it's different. Fair enough. We'll go with, this is your show. We'll go with what you say. All good.
So last part, where can people find you? How can people reach out to you?
Well, I have a blog, jeffreyparks.ca. If you want to reach out there, you can also find me on Twitter at Jeff Parks. But for the most part, through the blog, or, you know, if they want to get in touch with me, I can leave you my contact information and you can reach out to me that way. A lot of my social media and whatnot is, I've kind of gotten away from it a lot just to try to create a simpler, quieter life. But if people really want to reach out, I would encourage them to get in touch with you, and I'm happy to reach out to them through you if necessary, Jens.
Awesome. Jeff, thank you very much for being on the show. It was a pleasure talking to you, and hope to see you in other parts, what I'm doing again in the future.
It's been a pleasure and a privilege, Jens. Anything I can do to help out, I'm always here for you. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Jeff.